Story 1. Hello Reddit. I 45 had a feeling something was seriously wrong with my health, despite my doctor telling me otherwise. It started a few months ago with subtle symptoms, occasional headaches, mild fatigue, and some unexplained weight loss. My doctor assured me it was just stress and getting older, but my gut told me it was more. After all, I knew my body better than anyone else. Ignoring my doctor's advice to relax and not worrying, I started tracking my symptoms more closely. I kept a detailed journal of my headaches, my energy levels, and anything else that seemed off. One night, after a particularly bad headache, I decided to do some research. I spent hours reading medical articles and forums, trying to match my symptoms with any known conditions. Eventually, I stumbled upon an article about brain tumors. It sounded alarmist, but as I read through the symptoms, I felt a chill run down my spine. The descriptions matched my experience almost exactly. I knew I couldn't ignore this any longer. The next day, I called my doctor and demanded further tests. He was reluctant, still insisting it was nothing serious, but I persisted. Finally, he agreed to an MRI, if only to put my mind at ease. The results were a shock. I had a small, but potentially dangerous, tumor in my brain. The doctors moved quickly, and within a week, I was scheduled for surgery. The operation was successful, and the tumor was benign, but the experience was a wake-up call. My gut feeling had saved my life. Had I listened to my doctor's initial reassurances, who knows how much longer the tumor would have gone unnoticed. I now advocate for people to trust their instincts when it comes to their health. Sometimes, your body knows things before any test can confirm it. Story 2. Hello Reddit. I'm new here and wanted to share a story about a gut feeling that changed my life. I 29F had been working at a corporate job for 6 years, slowly climbing the ladder. It was a good job, with a steady paycheck and benefits, but something never felt quite right. I always had a nagging feeling that I wasn't where I was supposed to be. Last year, that feeling became impossible to ignore. I'd wake up with a sense of dread, and the thought of going to work made me anxious. It wasn't that the job was terrible. I liked my colleagues, and the work was manageable, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was wasting my potential. But the gut feeling persisted. I started baking more at home, experimenting with new recipes, and sharing them with friends and family. Their enthusiastic feedback gave me the confidence boost I needed. After a few months of this, I decided to take the plunge. I quit my job and enrolled in a pastry school. It was terrifying, but also exhilarating. For the first time in years, I felt alive. The months in pastry school flew by, and I graduated at the top of my class. With my savings and a small loan, I opened a tiny bakery in my neighborhood. The early days were tough, with long hours and steep learning curves, but my gut feeling kept me going. Today, my bakery is thriving. We have a loyal customer base, and I'm even considering expanding. Looking back, I realized that gut feeling was my subconscious trying to tell me that I wasn't living my true purpose. Trusting it was the best decision I've ever made. Story 3. Hello Reddit. This is my first time posting, and I also wanted to share a story about a gut feeling that had a huge impact on my life. I 52 have always been an avid sailor. My wife and I own a small sailboat, and we spend most weekends on the water. Last summer, we planned a week-long sailing trip along the coast. We were both looking forward to it, as it was our first long trip in years. A few days before we were set to leave, I started having a strange feeling of unease. It wasn't tied to anything specific, but it was persistent. I double-checked our equipment, the weather forecast, and our route, but everything seemed fine. My wife told me I was just being paranoid, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was going to go wrong. On the day of our departure, I decided to listen to my gut. I called the marina and postponed our trip. My wife was disappointed, but she trusted my judgment. That evening, we watched the news and learned that a sudden, severe storm had developed off the coast. The storm hit the area we had planned to sail through, causing significant damage to several boats and even leading to a few rescues at sea. Had we ignored my gut feeling and gone ahead with our trip, we would have been caught in the storm. Our small sailboat wouldn't have stood a chance against those conditions. My decision to trust my instincts had potentially saved our lives. It was a stark reminder of the power of intuition and the importance of listening to that inner voice, even when everything else seems fine. Story 4. I'm new to sharing my personal stories online, but I felt compelled to tell you about a gut feeling that changed my life. I, 35F, was engaged to my boyfriend of 5 years. We had a beautiful relationship, or so I thought. We were planning our wedding, and everything seemed perfect on the surface. However, a few months before the wedding, I started having doubts. It wasn't that he had done anything wrong. He was still the loving, supportive partner he had always been. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I chalked it up to pre-wedding jitters and tried to ignore it, but the feeling only grew stronger. I began to notice little things: his increasing late nights at work, his phone always on silent, and the vague answers when I asked about his day. One night, after he had fallen asleep, I had an overwhelming urge to check his phone. I had never invaded his privacy before, and it felt wrong, but my gut was screaming at me to do it. What I found confirmed my worst fears. He had been texting another woman, and the messages made it clear that they were more than just friends. I was devastated. Confronting him was one of the hardest things I've ever done. He admitted to the affair and apologized profusely, but the damage was done. I called off the wedding and moved out the next day. It was a painful and chaotic time, but I knew I had made the right decision. That gut feeling had saved me from a lifetime of potential heartache and betrayal. In the months that followed, I focused on healing and rediscovering myself. I started therapy, reconnected with old friends, and even took a solo trip to Europe. It wasn't easy, but I came out stronger and more self-assured. Trusting my gut had been the first step towards reclaiming my life. Story 5. I read it. I wanted to share too. I, 28F, live in a big city and commute to work by subway every day. One evening, I was working late and left the office around 10 p.m. The subway station was nearly empty, and I felt a strange sense of unease as I descended the stairs to the platform. As I waited for the train, I noticed a man standing a few feet away. He was pacing back and forth, occasionally glancing in my direction. Something about his behavior set off alarm bells in my head. My gut told me to get out of there, but I didn't want to seem paranoid or overreacting. The train arrived, and I got on, hoping to put some distance between us. To my dismay, the man followed me onto the same car. The uneasy feeling intensified. I moved to the far end of the car, but he kept his eyes on me. When the train stopped at the next station, I decided to trust my gut and get off. I quickly exited the train and made my way to the station's exit, keeping an eye on the man. He didn't follow me, but I still felt a sense of urgency to get to a safer place. I found a nearby cafe that was still open and went inside. As I sat down and caught my breath, I noticed the man walk past the cafe, looking around as if searching for someone. I reported the incident to the cafe staff and the police. They took my statement and advised me to be cautious. Although nothing happened that night, I'm convinced that trusting my gut feeling helped me avoid a potentially dangerous situation. Since then, I've become more aware of my surroundings and never hesitate to trust my instincts.